Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And we're doing a decent job saving the A's here in this 2038 season. As we sit here on June 1st, our 32-22 record is one of the 5 best records in baseball. Unfortunately for us, the team with the best record in baseball and probably the best team in baseball over the past half decade or so also resides in the AL West with us, and that's the 40-15 Texas Rangers, who are off to an outstanding start and have a 7.5 game lead on our A's as we sit here on June 1st. Positively, we are 4.5 games up on the final wild card spot in the American League, but certainly would like to put our Oakland squad in a position where we won't have to be playing in a wild card series come playoff time, and clearly we're going to need to be playing better to make that potentially a reality. Before we get moving forward in this episode as we approach the midway point of the season, right now we're exactly a third of the way through it at 32-22. Looking at the leaderboard, and here in fictional 2038, only one real familiar name from baseball today left on the leaderboards here, and that's Michael Harris II of the Atlanta Braves. Has had a nice career with them, 80.4 WAR over the course of his career, and he did win an MVP award in 2029. Over a 300 career hitter with about 1,200 runs scored, 1,200 ribbies, closing in on 400 home runs with 2,353 hits, given that he's already 37 years old and he's wrecked physically. Probably will not quite get to the 3,000 hit plateau. Harris also has a vesting option for next year, so if he gets 550 plate appearances this year, he'll likely be back with the Braves next year. Right now, looks like he's missed potentially 10 or 12 of their games. 180 at bats right now, 12 walks. So probably about a coin flip if he keeps playing at the pace that he has thus far, whether or not he will reach the vesting requirement. If he does end up having some injuries, which are certainly possible given his age and his injury proneness, seems unlikely that contract for next season will vest for Mr. Harris. And although we're off to a good start and we have become a pretty regular team over the last decade in Oakland, it's a little disappointing that attendance has really dipped over the last few weeks. Fan interest has dipped another point to 87 as well, so we've backed off ticket prices just a little bit by $1 to hopefully get a few more fans in the seats, but certainly disappointing that we're playing almost 600 ball with a still very small player payroll compared to many teams in baseball, and that the fans aren't showing up the way that we hoped they would be. Also still definitely disappointing that we've been at that minimal fan loyalty for, I think over a decade at this point, and given that we have been performing pretty well on the field over that past decade or so, hoping that at some point we'll get a little bump in the fan loyalty, which should make some of the attendance and financial aspects of the game a little simpler for us as we continue to plod along with the second lowest budget in all of baseball. Taking a look at our schedule over the next month, very American League centric, facing off against some Eastern teams. Finish up the series at Baltimore over the next couple of days, and then we'll host the Yankees. Then in the middle of the month, home against the Angels, at Houston, and at Seattle against some division foes. We'll then go on the road at Minnesota, before finishing up with a long homestand, 3 games against Toronto, 3 games against the Twins, and 3 games against the Red Sox. And through the first 10 days of the month of June, we've been a game over 500, so not great, 5-4 record. Have closed the gap to 5.5 in the division, as fortunately Texas has now lost 3 in a row. Only up 3.5 on the final wild card spot, though. So although we're closing the gap on Texas, other teams are closing the gap on us if we're unable to get by the Rangers in the division. One minor injury that we will talk about. We just put Kamani O'Banner on the IL with a sore elbow. Only supposed to have a 1-week impact, but he is already fragile physically, and we've got some good arms in AAA. O'Banner's been really good this year with a 1.75 ERA over 25 2/3 innings. Although, to be honest, his Sierra is more than 2.5 runs worse than his actual ERA, so he certainly has not been dominating despite an ERA that appears dominant. But as I mentioned, we've got a lot of good pitchers in the organization, and we brought up Jonathan Scherer, the 24-year-old former 15th round draft pick. He was not great in his major league debut with Oakland last year, but he has been very effective in AAA for us with a 1.44 ERA over 25 innings pitched, 21 saves for that Las Vegas squad as their closer, and he has a WAR of 1.2 already working out of the bullpen. So we're going to see what Scherer can do for us over the next couple of weeks while O'Banner is on the IL, and get to know a little bit more about a right-handed reliever who we think could have a pretty prominent part in our bullpen in the future. And unfortunately, as we head to the middle of the month of June, we dropped 2 out of the last 3 in that series against Houston. So a 6-6 record for our Oakland A's in the month of June. Hopefully we can do better over the second part of the month, as I noted, after these 6 games on the road, finishing up this 10-game road trip, more accurately. We will have 9 in a row at home to finish off the month of June. And the end of the road trip went about as expected. 500 record once again. Took 2 out of 3 in Seattle. Lost 2 out of 3 in Minnesota. Fortunately, we have won 3 out of the first 4 of the homestand. Took the series against Toronto, and we took the first game of our series against the Twins. So as we sit here on June 22nd, we are only 4.5 games behind in the division, and we are 5 up on the final wild card spot. Jake Ortega continues to have a nice bounce-back season after a lost 2037, second in the American League in batter WAR. Doug Weiss, the youngster who's gotten a spot in the rotation this year, third in the American League in ERA, and the youngster Chuck Huntley tied for the AL lead in saves. Mr. O'Banner is back and healthy. Not going to get into all the stats right now because we're only about a week away from getting to the midpoint of the season when we will do our annual review. But we are trying something different. O'Banner is back, and we are going to give him his first opportunity in Oakland to be our 5th starter. Bobby Garland, who's inherited that role for parts of the last 3 seasons, has been pretty ineffective in that role for us after a nice first start for us back towards the end of May. And we're going to see if maybe O'Banner can provide a bit more value for us, working as our number 5 starter, and hope that moving Garland back into the bullpen will allow him to be more effective going forward as well. And that homestand to finish off the month of June ended up being incredibly valuable to us. Ended up with an 8-1 record, swept the Twins and the Red Sox after losing that lone game when we were hosting Toronto. So as we sit here on July 1st, 49-32, so we are exactly halfway through the season, although I think we need to wait another day to get our mid-year review from Mr. Fiser. We've closed the gap on the Rangers to just 2 games as we've won 7 in a row. And interestingly, still have the 3rd best record in the American League as we're looking up at both the Rangers and the Yankees. But neither of those teams is really out of reach. And with our strong performance of late, we are now 8 games up on the final wild card spot, which the Royals and the White Sox are both tied for, just a game above 500. Taking a look at our team statistics at the midway point of the season, our 49-32 record is actually a little bit below expectations. And with that 7-game winning streak to end the month, a 17-10 record for the month of June ends up being our best monthly record of the year so far. Offense is good, 4th in the American League in runs scored, and you can see we're generally top handful of teams in most offensive categories, and even the category that we're worst in, home runs, we're 7th, so just above average in that. 4th in steals, 3rd in base running, 6th in defensive efficiency, and 3rd in zone rating. So pretty solid on the base paths and defensively as well. And we are 2nd in the American League in terms of our runs allowed, and top 5 in just about all pitching categories, leading the American League in bullpen ERA, pitcher WAR, home runs allowed, and walks. So a pretty solid performance thus far. Obviously, still want to get past the Rangers to win the division. And quite honestly, if we keep playing the way that we have this year, I think we'll get past them. You know, if we finish the season with over a 600 winning percentage, it's hard for me to imagine that won't end up better than the Rangers when all is said and done. I mean, I guess it might not happen, but at 49-32, we're obviously on target to win 98 games this year. I guess it's possible that they could win more than that, but it's a rare division in baseball when there are multiple teams with 98 games that they've won in a season. Probably happens a couple of times a decade, if that. And we lost the first game of the month of July to Toronto, but still with a 49-33 record, 82 games into the year. Mr. Fiser, very happy with what we've done. Still not happy that we haven't brought in an MVP. Don't see ourselves doing that, especially without a ton of money to bring on contracts. Also unhappy with our fan interest despite our success on the field. That being said, he's been happy with our progress towards goals overall, very happy towards our overall performance. The other goal that we do have this year that's not showing up here, longer-term goal, has been to build a dynasty, which means that we probably got to win it all this season to make him happy on that front. And now that we are just past the midway point of the season, we will do our annual mid-season review of where we stand and how we're doing, start planning for what we might want to think about as we approach the trade deadline over the next 4+ weeks. As we just talked about, our pitching staff is really good. The starting rotation we thought would be a big strength, and certainly our top 4 starters, the players who would likely be starting for us in the playoffs, assuming that there's no injuries, all having strong years for us. Jesus Saldana, 6-4 record for us with a 3.06 ERA, led the AL in ERA a year ago as a rookie when he was robbed and did not earn the Rookie of the Year award. Chase Dora leads the team with 8 wins, 8-2 record, 3.25 ERA, almost a win above replacement. Doug Weiss, we already talked about, 6-3 record this year, 2.81 ERA, and a 2.5 WAR for him. Jackson Ferris, the veteran lefty, likely his final season with us, 8-3 record, 3.67 ERA, 1.6 WAR. He's back to looking for about $15 million a year and now looking for a 5-year deal. Given his age and given his fragility, I think we're not necessarily going to make any long-term or even medium-term commitments to him until after the season, when we see exactly what he does and whether he has any injuries between now and then. Can't rule out bringing him back, but he's also not a guy who I think his price is going to go up to $20 million or something. So I'd rather see another few cards before we need to make a decision on Ferris, thinking that we've seen over the course of the last several months his price kind of fluctuating between $12.5 to $15 million for a potential extension. Kamani O'Banner, we mentioned, we just put him into the rotation. Obviously, a very small sample size of just 1 start for us. Gave up 2 earned runs over 5 innings. Did earn the win a couple of days ago against the Red Sox. So was not an incredible performance, but it was still a more than acceptable performance from a number 5 starter. We've talked about Chunk Huntley, the left-handed reliever, 2.30 ERA, 24 saves, almost a win above replacement for us. He struck out 41 batters in 31 1/3 innings and does an outstanding job for us in that closer role. And speaking of outstanding jobs, Doug Weiss had done an outstanding job for us as a stopper for the last year. We made the trade to bring Mike Orozco on board, and he has pitched a ridiculous 84 1/3 innings for us through the first half of the year, on pace to qualify for the ERA title, working out of the bullpen. Put up a 2.45 ERA for us, already pitched in 49 games. So it's conceivable if he stays healthy, which is certainly no guarantee given the workload we're putting on him, as well as his fragility. And you just look at this, he's pitched over 25 pitches 3 out of 4 days at this point. But if he stays healthy and we keep using him in such an abusive manner, there is an outside chance that he could pitch 100 games for us this year. He has been absolutely outstanding with 103 strikeouts in those 84 1/3 innings and a 2.2 WAR. Daniel Blanco, another young right-hander, 5-2 record, 3.28 ERA, working out of the bullpen. Garland had done pretty well for us in the bullpen. As I mentioned, we've just moved him out of the rotation. As a reliever this year, a 3.31 ERA, but in his 6 starts, he had a 2-3 record with a 5.72 ERA, 1.76 WHIP, and he was walking batters at a relatively dangerous pace, 16 and 28 1/3 innings. Couple of our experienced middle relievers have also had good years. Mike Curtis with a 3 ERA, 31 strikeouts in 27 innings. And Jeremy Scholl, a 3.10 ERA over 20 1/3 innings pitched. Been a bit above replacement level for our former closer, who is now more of a getting expensive middle reliever for us. Speaking of getting expensive relievers, Kevin Patterson, who started the year as our number 5 starter but was demoted to the bullpen, having a real rough year, 2-5 record with a 6.63 ERA. He's set to be making decent money for the next few years. If we're not going to have him in the rotation, he's very expensive as a long reliever out of the bullpen, particularly for a team with the limited resources that we have. And R.J. Cope has not done a good job for us as a lefty specialist this year. Now, he does have a good track record of being successful with us, but has definitely struggled this year with the 8.37 ERA, allowed 30 hits and 11 walks, 4 homers among those 30 hits in just 23 and 2/3 innings this year. 351 BABIP against him, and he's been below replacement level. He's another guy who's making decent money in his final arbitration eligible year this year. 31 years old, fragile physically. He's been a really nice left-handed arm for us over the years, and an occasional two-way player. While we're talking about that, we'll see if he's done anything this year. Just one at-bat this season, and he struck out in the lone opportunity he's gotten. So 3 for 21 in his career, but does have 1 home run and 4 ribbies in his limited action as a batter and position player. Not a ton that I would change with this pitching staff. We have put both Patterson and Cope on the trade block. Don't know how much interest either of them will generate. But if we wanted to kind of open up some spots in the pitching staff, most likely in the bullpen, to potentially bring up some of our younger players, whether it could be Scherer or some of our other prospects. To me, Patterson and Cope would be the guys that we would be most likely to deal to try to open up some space for some of our youngsters. Turning our attention now to our position players, and there might be a little bit more for us to think about doing here. We've kind of flipped the script on our catching platoon, which we've had in place for the last several seasons with Ackley and Boakai. But Boakai is the guy getting more playing time this year. Ackley has started just 36 games for us, and he's hitting just a .172. The offense has been so bad that he's actually been below replacement level despite his strong defense. Boakai started 47 games for us, hitting .261 with 5 homers and 17 ribbies in 165 at-bats. Been a little bit below replacement level, or below average, below league average, more accurately offensively, but still a win above replacement level thanks to his good defense. Certainly anticipate that we'll be playing Boakai more than Ackley going forward. But catcher is a position that I think we could certainly upgrade on offensively through the trade market. The question is, with the really good defense that we have in both Boakai and Ackley, and the fact that we are a very pitching-dependent team, and we're getting some excellent pitching from many of the pitchers on our squad, whether we would want to disrupt the apple cart and bring on someone who's not necessarily as strong defensively. Clearly, if we could bring on a great hitting catcher who's also great defensively, that would be the best option for us, but probably would be a pretty expensive option as well. It is kind of interesting as we sit here. One of the things that just happens in OOTP, Jaden Boakai, a guy who's been our organization for over a decade at this point, since we drafted him in 2027, been with us in the major leagues for parts of the last 6 years, and we've had a excellent scout in place for close to a decade at this point. Somehow we don't have very high scouting accuracy on him, despite the fact that he's been on our major league roster for over half a decade and been in our organization for over a decade. First baseman Andy Brailovsky, hitting .301 this year, 10 home runs, only 28 ribbies, but he's still put up a 125 WRC plus and a 1.7 WAR, has scored 43 runs. He's hitting closer to the top of the order. Nice bounce back year so far from last year when he had a 117 WRC plus, but as you may remember, Brailovsky in the second half of last season was one of several players on our team that really went into a prolonged months-long slump in the summer into the fall, and hopefully we can avoid that with Brailovsky and others this year. Juan Ramos hitting 253, 12 homers, and 53 ribbies. Still one of the better power bats on our team, but honestly, the 12 homers and 53 ribbies midway through the season is not good. Also, a little quirk, we've only played 82 games, but he's got stats for 83 games. My assumption is there must have been a game that we got rained out along the way. I hope it's not like a bug in the program, although honestly, if it is, it's not the end of the world, but I'm assuming maybe there was a game that wasn't official that the stats still count for. He's obviously played 162 games as our DH each of the last couple of years, so I'm kind of cognizant that we have him in the lineup every day, but a weird quirk right there. The home run and the ribby pace, not as strong as he's been in his first 2 years in Oakland, but still putting up a 126 WRC plus for us, which we're not going to complain about. Steve Allison, utility infielder, hitting 218 and 55 at-bats. He's been replacement level. He's a good presence in the clubhouse. He's versatile and strong defensively, and he's not an embarrassment as a hitter. Comfortable with that bench player role that he has for us, so a pretty good utility infielder. Alejandro Landin, another one of the guys who really struggled in the second half of last year, has a 277 average, 14 homers, 40 ribbies for us midway through the season, 116 WRC plus for the veteran second baseman. Shortstop, Andy Toribio, the batting average has dipped to 229, so offensively he has not really kind of lived up to what he did his first couple of years in the majors. Hit a 283 average and a 115 WRC plus as a rookie, 25 homers while hitting 269 the year after that, but that was his peak in run production with 84 ribbies that year. And he's been a bit below average offensive player for us for the last 2.5 seasons. Now, given that he is a good, solid defensive player, he's still been well above replacement level. But Toribio, unfortunately, the bat hasn't been as good as we have hoped. That being said, with Brailovsky at first, Landin at second, Toribio at third, Ramos at DH, and Allison as a utility infielder, don't think there's anything obvious we need to do to upgrade those positions. Could be a bit of a different story at third base, however, which is why we've waited to tackle that until the end. Anulfo Dolan hitting just 210 in 200 at-bats for us, 69 WRC plus, slightly below replacement level. He is the only captain personality we have on our team, so getting him out of the lineup would potentially have some not great, but probably not crippling effects on our clubhouse. But certainly would appreciate it if he was more productive offensively than he has been. Rodney Mesidor, who he's been platooning with, is hitting 274 in 95 at-bats, primarily starting against left-handed pitching. He's put up a 121 WRC plus for us. So he's definitely been the strong part of that platoon. Looking at his splits, a very strong 140 WRC plus in the 56 at-bats he has against lefties. And he's been around the league average guy against right-handed pitching this year. Does have a couple of home runs in 39 at-bats. So feels like we're kind of using Mesidor in the right role against left-handed pitching as a third baseman. The question is whether we want to keep using Dolan against right-handed pitching. And again, the complicating factor would be losing that captain personality in the clubhouse. When we look at his splits, He's actually been pretty productive as a switch hitter against left-handed pitchers. So we're good against lefties at third base, but only a 63 WRC plus for Dolan this year against right-handed pitching, which is not optimal. Turning to our outfielders, made the big trade last offseason of Mr. Taveras to bring on Mike Alanis, and Alanis hasn't been great. I almost felt by the willingness of the Cubs to give him up, despite a batting profile that looked really good, that he might just end up being a guy that isn't as good as his ratings indicate. Obviously coming off of a real nice couple of seasons in Chicago, but with us he's been a below average offensive player, hitting just .218. Does have 11 homers, 41 ribbies, 15 doubles, 6 for 6 on the base paths. He's still been above replacement level overall, but certainly was hoping that he would be an above average offensive player as well, which unfortunately has not been for us. Jake Ortega, as we've talked about, though, having a really nice bounce-back season after an injury-plagued year a season ago, was out for the year by mid-June with a broken kneecap. 327 average, 22 doubles, 13 home runs, 18 steals for us so far, a 163 WRC plus and a 4.4 WAR, as Mr. Ortega continues to try to work on his Hall of Fame bona fides. He's almost 31 years old at this point. He was a college player that we drafted out of Oregon State, so not going to have the longest potential career. Came up with us initially as a 23-year-old, and he's been up here ever since. At almost 31 years old, he's barely over 1,000 career hits, but with a 42 WAR, MVP award, a couple of playoff MVP awards, won the World Series with us a couple of seasons ago, and he's a career 300 hitter, although he's not necessarily going to compile massive statistics. Still think that if he keeps playing over the next 8 years, the way he's played over the first 8 years of his career, certainly will end up as a very strong Hall of Fame candidate. Question is whether he's going to be able to stay healthy, given his fragility, and effective, given that he's now in his 30s. And he's also heading into his potential final 2.5 years with Oakland, presumably at the age of 32, 33, when he potentially would be hitting the market in a few years. Still probably will be looking for pretty significant money. Would love to potentially keep him as a lifelong Oakland A, but obviously with a couple of years left on his contract. Actually, I'm surprised he's willing to consider, I guess because of those option years, but you can see here, looking for a 7-year extension, taking him up through his age 39 season at almost $37 million a year. Not something I want to commit to right now, given his age, given his injury proneness, and given our financial situation. But certainly would love to keep him around with the A's for the entirety of his career. Center fielder Sergio Palomarez hitting only .241 for us this year. He is 7 of 8 stealing bases. Been slightly below average offensively, still above replacement level. Good speed, solid defensive player, and a decent contact hitter, at least in terms of his profile, but hasn't been as productive this year as he was a year ago when he put up a 108 WRC plus for us in close to 400 at-bats in his first full season in the majors. Right fielder Arturo Uresti hitting .258, 14 homers, 55 ribbies, 122 WRC plus, and a 1.8 WAR. He is certainly living up to the potential that we hoped he would have when he was an IAFA signing 8.5 years ago for us. So as I think about the team, to me, third base and catcher are kind of the most obvious areas to think about in the trade market. Don't know if there's going to be any clear answers there, and as I noted, would love to ultimately still have a captain personality on the team that we're playing regularly, so not sure that there's going to be a perfect fit out there, but it is something that we'll be looking at over the next month or so. And when we look at the trade block, not that we're going to necessarily do anything immediately, there's actually some pretty interesting defensive catchers available. Just don't know how much they're really going to add to our offense. So unless these guys were really cheap for us to bring on board, I don't necessarily see where there's anyone that's going to be a huge impact player for us. Joe Light, similar defensively to the guys that we have, although his arm is not as good. Don't necessarily see his bat being a difference-making bat to potentially bring around. Are a couple of captain personalities with Malcolm Moore and Jefferson Quero, so we'll keep our eyes on them, but I don't really know that there's a obvious answer for us at the catcher position, at least among the guys who are being aggressively marketed by their existing teams. And third base, kind of a similar story. Don't know that there's anyone who really jumps off the page that is going to help us materially offensively. And you can see no captain personalities there. Brooks Lee, we did have on our team just a couple of years ago, only had 2 at-bats for us in 2036, but having a really incredible year in Washington this year, 164 WRC plus over the 105 at-bats he's had, 6 homers and 22 ribbies, so he's been incredibly productive, but he's 37 years old, wrecked physically. I think if we were to make a trade to bring on another infielder, we'd probably want someone that I was a bit more confident would be a true impact player and likely to be able to play 70, 75 games for us over the rest of the way. And I can't say with great confidence, looking at Lee's ratings, his age, and his injury proneness, that he would do any of those things for us consistently. Not that we need to look for a pitcher. As I mentioned, we've added R.J. Cope and Kevin Patterson have joined Jackson Ferris on the trade block. But Andres Rojas, the outstanding knuckleballer who's making $55 million this year, the final year of his contract with the Marlins, 9-6 record with a 3.01 ERA. Would love to bring a guy like that on board as a rental, but unfortunately, they are still looking for a massive haul for him, and it's also a situation where we would need them to retain basically all of his contract to make things work. So you can see if we have them retain 95% of his contract, nobody that makes it work now. And if we put in Juan Pimentel, the highest ceiling prospect in our organization, and we also offer them Jesus Saldana, a pitcher who's arguably as good as Rojas, much younger, signed to a long-term contract. That does get the deal done, but I don't think I'm going to send a 23-year-old who's off to a brilliant start in his career, and we have signed at what we think will be a very team-friendly contract for the next 9 seasons, to rent Rojas for just a few months. Not a logical move to me. Certainly would do it for Jackson Ferris, although Ferris is vetoing the trade right now. Certainly would happily throw in a Kevin Patterson, but that's just going to anger them. And you can see that with Patterson and Pimentel, I'm guessing even if we throw in a bunch of our other top prospects, Luis Godina, Darnell Selvey, David Ibarra, Jonah Richards. Oh, we can actually get a deal done at that point, but I don't know. I'd love to get rid of Patterson, but I don't know that adding in 5 of the top prospects in our organization and then needing to include another top prospect or another very important major league player is a logical trade for a rental of Mr. Rojas, as outstanding as he actually is. So as we sit here on July 2nd, feeling pretty good about the team, even though we have dropped another point in fan interest, but attendance is at least stabilizing at a fairly high level, and we're set to make a little more revenue than we did a year ago. We'll be approaching the draft in just about a week or so, so we're probably not going to cover a ton of ground in our next episode. We'll likely just sim over the next week, continue talking about trade, and then preview the draft. But until then, any thoughts on what we should or should not perhaps pursue in the trade market would be helpful to hear. And as always, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.